bunch of friends and I went to the city to go see NXT TakeOver in Brooklyn at that time. The next day was SummerSlam. It was a big deal. Manhattan was basically belonging to the WWE for that weekend. So we get to the city and we've got a few hours to kill. So we end up going to Times Square and checking out the Toys R Us there. As we're getting ready to leave, we end up passing through a section that was themed like Candyland and basically was just an oversized candy store in there. And we see Luke Harper. And we all look at each other and we just think how fucking strange it is seeing this 6'4" wild man in a Toys R Us in the candy section. Now, I grew up with 6 foot and above family members. I'm not exactly intimidated by tall people, whereas my friends all seemed a little too nervous. They seemed almost scared of the sheer size of this man. So finally, I decide to be the one to step up and go approach him. I don't remember everything that occurred, but I remember asking, what are you doing here? It seemed like a strange place for such a person to be at. And he just makes a gesture towards this little blonde child. With hindsight, I now realize that was little Brodie. At that point, I knew damn well it wasn't my place to ask for a photo or an autograph or anything of the sort. It was very fascinating to see that side of him, and I feel like I got to see something very special that day.
Aw. I mean, I've heard this story as it was edited, and I don't really expect to choke up a little bit, but then as I do, like, my eyes are watering a little bit, which makes sense because it's my friend and he's passed, but I guess this call allows me to kind of repicture my friend and recreate live images of him in my brain, and that's kind of what makes me so happy, because there's so much footage of him and I can go watch him wrestle, but this story is almost like footage that we've never seen before. So I get to place him in a whole new place, and I get to see different footage of Brodie in my head with little Brodie, and it chokes me up a little bit. Yeah, of course. I kept on asking myself, if this wasn't Brodie and little Brodie, would I play this story on the podcast? And I guess I shouldn't even really ask myself that question, because that's what the call is, and that's what attracted me so much to it, is just the idea of Big Brodie and Little Brodie in Toys R Us together in the candy aisle. And I picture Brodie just being like, I got the little guy. The kid needs candy, and I'm a super dad. What you gonna do? I do also love letting you know that giant, huge, enormous wrestler men will and do go to Toys R Us. Just look at the Major Wrestling Figure podcast. Those guys are camping out at Toys R Us. And this generation, maybe not in the 60s or 70s when those guys were all just beer-drinking fighters, but this generation of wrestlers, we are all, for the most part, in wrestling because we love wrestling, and we grew up going to Toys R Us and looking in the toy aisle and looking in the wrestling aisle and asking our parents or our guardians if we can have the wrestlers. Usually they would say no. Then you'd beg them enough, or you'd save up enough money that you could finally buy one. And that nostalgia, just like my nostalgia for wrestling, why I'm doing this podcast, is why we as giant wrestlers who are now in the wrestling industry will still always, no matter where it is, head over to the toy section and check out what wrestlers are in the toy section. And it's very cool now to be a part of a company where I can go and see AEW wrestlers. And there's a different variety out there in terms of wrestling figures, but this call isn't necessarily about wrestling figures or candy. It's about getting another vision, another scene, another story of our friend Brodie Lee and his son, Brodie Jr. And for that, I thank you. Hey, thanks for watching. That call was part of a whole podcast called Wrestling Anonymous. Listen to the whole thing weekly wherever you listen to your podcasts. Go subscribe. And while you're at it, subscribe right here on YouTube to Colt Cabana's channel. Thank you.